Hello and welcome to Taking Liberties, episode 26. My name is Lee. This week I'm joined by Vikas in Canberra.
Hey.
And it's just us two today. We're just rocking it, a duo. We're going to be talking about the two things. So the recent announcement by the Turnbull government that they're going to ban all the refugees. And we're going to talk about public servants. Yeah,
executive power.
Yeah, executive power and public servants and that kind of thing. So,
Yeah.
So we'll start off with the
To be fair, we're not just talking about two things. We're talking about two sort of really big policy sort of issues.
Yeah, two very broad subjects. So first off, let's talk about Malcolm Turnbull's boat ban. So on Sunday, the Turnbull government announced that they were going to ban, basically essentially stop any refugee that comes by boat from coming to Australia. So up until now, they've kept them offshore, and I think they've sort of tried to make refugees go to New Zealand or to PNG or to anywhere but Australia. But it's usually been sort of bilateral agreements, like under Rudd and Gillard, they had the Malaysia solution. This is the first time they've said, total ban, any refugees, all gone. So yes, lefties are losing their absolute minds over this.
They are.
Rightfully so, I'd say.
It's interesting for me. This is the most extreme sort of policy position since 1939 United States, when they knocked back the spirit of... Sorry, was it the St. Louis or something? The boat which had all the Jews?
So. Yeah.
Yeah, so this is the most extreme sort of policy position since that any country has actually taken with respect to refugees. And we were starting from a pretty extreme point to start with. But it's interesting, so theoretically, the lefties that have been saying there's no legal ability for the government to do this, I think they're actually wrong, mostly because effectively it comes down to country sovereignty, and Parliament is sovereign and therefore can pretty much fucking do whatever it wants to the extent of what our Constitution says. And to anyone pointing out, oh, look, here's the Refugee Convention, I'm sorry, dudes.
Yeah.
That's not... Yeah, national sovereignty overrides any binding agreement or whatever. Now, the impact in that is maybe we might cop a UN... Actually, we won't cop a UN condemnation at all because...
they don't condemn Saudi Arabia or Sudan or North Korea or any of those guys.
Anyone who's a US ally will not get a condemnation because of US veto power.
Unless you're Israel. Well, no, the Human Rights Council might have a go at us, but who gives a crap about them because they're a bunch of totalitarian assholes to begin with. So their credibility is basically like dog turds got more credibility on the Human Rights Council than most of the members. So
So I wouldn't worry too much about the Human Rights Council either. So the net impact to the Australian government to do this is negligible. I mean, it might make dealing with, say, Indonesia or Malaysia or any of those countries along the way a little bit more difficult, because effectively what it does is, if Australia says it's not going to accept anyone, those people have to go somewhere, and that somewhere is typically their last port of call. So you'll have Indonesia or Malaysia basically saying, why the fuck are these people coming back here?
Yeah.
Right?
So, I guess the plan from the government's perspective is that they never come here in the first place.
I don't know how they'll do it, actually. Because there's a logistical issue in the sense that, okay, so you can tow them back out of Australian borders. Fine. You can do that if you catch them. The question is, what do you do then, right? So if someone just stays at your border the entire time, right, and just kind of just annoys you, you can't technically tow them anywhere else. I mean, that would be violating their actual right. Well, the only way you can do that is to technically break maritime convention. And the way we've been getting around it now is through multilateral deals with countries like Indonesia. We're like, well, yes, this boat is technically in our maritime borders, but we're going to let you tow them, right, as an understanding of agreements between our country. Now, I think that will dissipate as an agreement, or the Indonesians will come back and ask us for a hell of a lot more money, or some sort of diplomatic arrangement will have to happen to keep that going. But the point is, I think it's there to satisfy that conservative nativist tinge inside the National Party.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And within the Liberal Party.
They're just the National Party on this show.
Fair enough. All right. Well,
Yeah,
from here on out.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, I think it's there to satisfy that particular group of people.
Yeah.
But in terms of what will really happen, I think what it'll mean is either the Australian government ends up giving a crap ton more money to Indonesia and Malaysia and possibly the Philippines, or it'll mean some sort of deal of some sort being reached with our regional partners to make that a reality, because there's no other way to stop the boats.
Well, there is a way. You just tow them out to international waters until they run out of fuel and water and drown, which, you know...
Which is a really
Yeah,
bad...
it's not. That's not going to happen. I mean, you know, like that's more or less what happened to the Jews, like who went going from port to port. Didn't they? I thought they were like...
They didn't drown.
Okay.
They got accepted by by the Dutch.
Oh, okay.
Ironically, yeah.
Yep.
So that was the entire crisis there.
Yeah.
That they eventually managed to reach a deal with the Dutch to take them. The Dutch and the Belgians.
Okay.
Ironically,
Probably not a great place to be in the middle of World War II when you're Jewish.
Yeah.
Anyway, I mean, like essentially, like really, this whole issue is about PR. Like, it's actually like that's the driving force anyway. Like, it's not actually that we're stopping all refugees, because we're still taking tens of thousands of refugees, from what I understand.
We still take 13,500. Actually, no, I think it's been up to 19,000.
Yeah, I thought it was about 20,000 or so.
Yeah.
You know, we're not ceasing immigration in other aspects. Obviously, it's not super easy to get to Australia. It's relatively easy to get to Australia in the first place. But
no, it's actually really hard. Yeah.
Oh, I thought it was
Australia is one of the few countries in the world which actually still requires a tourist visa.
Yeah, right.
It's a dwindling number of countries that require tourist visas.
Okay.
But yeah, Australia is actually quite hard to get into, and it should be noted.
But we're not restricting any immigration any further. It's really specifically about the PR of boat people within the constituency of the Liberal Party who don't like them and haven't liked them for about 20 years. And Malcolm Turnbull, being a spineless cretin, has to keep appeasing these people because he has no credibility with anybody else. Frankly, I mean, as far as I'm concerned, I think this is just like one more step of ghastly treatment, like of a liberal regime. So it's like, I mean, the whole border fast thing.
Yeah.
The militarization of immigration is just terrible. I mean, I've sympathy with, you know, like, so Andrew Bolt types will say, well, you know, under Ronnie Gillard, they came here and drowned. Okay, that's bad, but
this isn't that.
Yeah.
This isn't that group at all, and this isn't that argument at all.
Yeah.
Right? The argument isn't that it's stopping people from drowning; it is that we're not going to take them at all.
Exactly, which is just crazy.
Which
yeah. I mean,
from my perspective, it talks to a particular group, and I think Turnbull might have miscalculated on this one. So what's happened is it's clear that he's seen the dwindling poll numbers and gone, well, look, the easy money is effectively attacking refugees, and because that's worked in the past. But the thing is, rehash of policy, I kind of look at it like inoculation, right? Something that might have worked in the past doesn't necessarily work again, and I think this time people expect this kind of thing from Tony Abbott. Right, he's the mad monk. He's the arch conservative type.
Yeah.
I would not be surprised if Tony Abbott came out with this policy. In fact, I'd probably find it more endearing. People who might, who are inclined to think conservatively are more likely to vote along those lines and rally behind that leader. As opposed to what the public perception is with Turnbull, where people immediately jump to the cynical position, just as you had, and just as I am currently, let's say, it's obviously a cynical ploy.
Yeah.
And there's that lack of genuine concern in terms of from a policy perspective, which I don't think will translate to the approval bump that whoever Turnbull's advisors are looking for. So it's gonna look cynical. So I don't think he's gonna actually get the votes translated. It's going to be done in a very hostile Senate as well, right?
Yeah, that's the other thing. I mean, you've essentially like the balance of power is the Greens and a mishmash of cross senators, where you got, Xenophon team is going to be like centre left or, far left even. We haven't heard much about what they're going to be doing, but presumably, like Nick Xenophon, they're going to be lefties. Obviously, One Nation are going to love it.
Yeah, One Nation are going to love it. So you've got 4 senators on board.
Yeah.
But that's 30, what is it, 33 plus 4, that's 37. You still need 2 votes.
Yeah. Well, right. Whoever replaces Bob Day is probably going to like it. I suspect, because, Family First are basically a Christian party, and most Christian parties are on board for getting the muzzies out.
Yeah, that's true.
David Leinhelm has done deals on immigration before, I think, if I recall correctly. Like he's horse traded.
He's horse traded, and unfortunately, I think that's what'll happen again. But at the same time, his entire pet thing is this fucking gun, the Adler.
The Adler.
So, which actually pisses me off. If I was to pick, an issue, honest to God, I would have picked like school vouchers, something that gets your name on the frickin' front pages.
You mean as opposed to talking up guns? I think that gets his name on the front page, just not for...
No. But I mean, yeah. I just mean like get your name on the front pages for something people are into, right? Yeah, school choice.
Yeah, I don't know. I think Adler's probably actually in that regard better, because his constituency, David's constituency, is not all libertarians everywhere. It's going to be shooters in New South Wales.
And to be perfectly honest, I think he's already captured that, because shooters only get 2% of the vote.
Sure.
Right? And if you take a look at it, they didn't vote for him last time, right? And I'm sitting there going like, and he's the most gun-friendly person. I think he's got every freaking gun nut in the country already voting for him.
Sure.
Right? I think he could just be like, I support the Adler, and that's it, and not horse trade on, and he'd still get.
Sure. Yeah, that's a fair point. That's a fair point.
Yeah, which is why I'm saying, like, I would have picked school choice, or I would have picked some piece of key reform to Medicare, something to get your name out there and show that you are able to achieve actual liberal reforms better than the Liberal Party.
Well, yeah.
Yeah, and I should do like a segment on my criticisms of David's positions and what I would have done instead, given that same position. Now,
it's ANC and guns have been his main things. I mean, he could have done a 2-man show with Bob. Not that he can do it anymore, but with Bob Day, he could have sort of done a 2-man show on IR reform, because that's something obviously Bob Day was really on board for, and has been for a long while. And he could have made that like sort of. And
honest to God, this is devolving into I'm thinking a serious episode we need to go through. Failures of David Leinhelm in pursuing the libertarian cause in Parliament. And to be perfectly honest, to the LDP's credit, they do listen to these, and they do offer what happened behind the scenes as an example to the decisions they've made. And I wish every other party did that.
Well, I mean, like, I think what we see with David is what we see with all senators, which is their own like when you have crossbench senators or individual senators or very small groups of even in small groups, like you think about Clive Palmer's lot, essentially that was a rabble of individuals, and so even small party, we see with Malcolm Roberts now, like when you've got these individual senators, it all comes down to their own personal idiosyncrasies and biases and interests, and they're not, I mean, all of that gets buried in major party politics. So with the Greens and Labour and Liberals, all that individuality is more or less snuffed out, unless you're like Cory Bernardi, who's just like way out on the fringe. When you have no sort of no party loyalty, but when you have no sort of masters in the party,
party discipline.
Yeah, party discipline. And really, when you're the only senator for your party, and like one of the only reasons why you're even registered as a party, you hold all the cards. Like, So,
but to sort of bring it back to our topic, I mean, like, the way this sort of translates in the National Party is that they've got this group of people which are more likely to support Tony Abbott, who are now basically dictating policy.
Sure.
And if it comes to the position that, hey, we can dictate the policy, right? What's to stop us from putting our deposed leader back in?
Yeah. Well, it could be a sort of a throwing a bone to them to sort of stave off any challenge.
Yeah.
Which I can't imagine it actually would, because like he said, you might if you're getting what you want, you might as well have the leader you want as well. So at this point, the Liberals wouldn't really lose a whole lot more credibility for getting rid of Turnbull and taking back Abbott. Apart from completely blunting any suggestion that Labour are a rabble you can't trust because they keep knocking off leaders.
Yeah,
but you've already lost that because you got rid of Abbott and put in Turnbull. Like that argument's already been lost.
Although truth be told, people would agree with the reason to get rid of Abbott. Abbott was running like most people. Like when Rudd got knocked off, right? He was at 52% or something like that. News poll.
Yep.
Right. That was like nobody could understand. It's just like you've still got the majority. What exactly are you?
Yeah, I don't know. I actually thought they were. You mean as in two-party preferred?
Yeah, two-party preferred.
I thought they were actually behind.
No. They were behind when they knocked off Gillard.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So hang on, let me just actually yank that up. I was pretty sure.
Because I thought his personal approval was actually not too low, but the two-party had sunk below 50. But it was like 49-51. But the trend had been down for a while, and they lost their nerve.
Let me give you a... Oh, yeah, you're right. They were behind. They were 48.
Yep.
Yeah, its personal approval was at 52.
Yep.
Yeah, my bad.
That's all right.
So they obviously got the willies about being behind on the two-party preferred. I suppose that's why people were sitting there and it didn't make very much sense. Plus, they actually didn't go out of their way to sort of, I guess you could say, get rid of everything that made the Rudd presidency, the Rudd prime minister presidency.
The Rudd presidency. Yeah, no, you're right. They essentially changed the leader, they didn't change any of their policies. And they didn't really do that under Turnbull either. I mean,
no, they didn't wait. They waited until the election to change the direction of the policies, right? So what
change of direction?
Well, the plebiscite, for example, right? So under Abbott, it was like they weren't gonna even vote on gay marriage.
Okay, I wouldn't exactly call that a massive change in policy. It's still the plank of it is like piss little economic, like not even economic. It's just like
look. When very little changes, you take the little changes that happen become massive.
No. That's not how I operate anyway.
Yeah,
I think essentially like it remained the same. And if you look back at Gillard, there was slight differences as well. I mean, she got deposed at a similar point in the election cycle as Rudd did. So going into that next election, there would have been a couple of things that were different. So I don't know.
Yeah,
anyway, any final thoughts before we move on to topic number 2?
No, but I want to move into topic number 2 by saying Brandis is a cunt.
Okay, I won't dispute that. Actually, you should mention before we move on, there's probably previous episodes where we've covered like the libertarian response to boat people, and I'll see if we can dig them up, and I'll try and put a link up in either the show notes or in the YouTube video. Okay, you want to say that line again, just so we can totally segue what you just said?
Brandis is a cunt.
Yeah, okay, there you go. It's probably the sort of thing that when it's once said, you would be inclined to say it again. So in the last, I mean, it's basically, this is sort of a broader sort of thing, but in the last week and a half, there's been a big hoo-ha over the Solicitor General, who basically gives legal advice from the public service to the government and to ministers and whatever. He was the previous guy, Justin Gleeson, had a bad relationship with George Brandis. He resigned, saying he couldn't do his job anymore because Brandis basically muzzled him and said he couldn't give any advice to anybody else unless Brandis gave the okay.
No. He said he should only give advice to the questions which only Brandis asked, and Brandis would be the single point of filter. He would filter all the questions and give all the answers back. And I'm sitting there going like, that is actually not the job of the Attorney General. The Attorney General is meant to be the attorney for the government.
Yeah.
Right? The Solicitor General is meant to give the best legal advice to that Parliament possible. Look, I'm not gonna debate, how it should work. Everyone has their own opinions on how it should work. But my point is, like, I agree with Gleeson. If someone is being obstructionist in that way and created a situation where you cannot possibly do your job, as per what happens in the Westminster system, he should resign as someone from the executive department who has a disagreement with the cabinet.
Yep. So really, we're going to talk about like the relationship between government and public, between governments and bureaucrats. So as you sort of pointed out, usually there's quite a division, and if you can't work with the guy in the government, you quit. The Labor and the Greens have made a lot of hay out of Brandis's actions, which, to be fair, they never liked Brandis much to begin with.
There's a lot of reasons not to like Brandis.
This is a long, ongoing thing. And there was an issue you wanted to bring up about something in England. I can't remember what it was.
I don't know about England, but the United States had the
the
FBI.
US, yeah, sorry, yeah.
Yeah, the FBI director had opened up investigations against Hillary Clinton, based on from what I gather in the news reporting, the Anthony Weiner scandal. God, I love that guy's name. I just can't make.
Especially given his transgressions, is just there is really no one better to have that name.
Yeah,
you couldn't write a better character.
Yeah, I mean, so the guy is a Jew. He has that high-pitched, nasally voice that we always make fun of in, Hollywood movies about Jews. Yeah, I mean, he just says ridiculous things and does stupid things. He's a caricature. He's literally. He gets his dick out. He's a.
Let's be real. Yeah, he shows his penis to people all the time. Okay.
Yeah, but in this case, it's sexting. 16.
Yeah, sexting. Well, see, that's the interesting thing. So basically, for those who aren't aware, the Hillary Clinton email scandal has sort of gone away because James Comey, wrongly I think, refused to do anything about her behaviour. Okay, so be it.
No. So what happened is they couldn't find those emails because she deleted them, right? And then he basically said, if it was anyone else, I would have prosecuted them. Right?
Yeah. See, I think there's no men's requirement. So anyway, we should have a separate discussion about whether James Comey was right. But nevertheless,
you and Steve can have a separate show about that, and I will help. I will be happy to host that. Where you guys discuss all the legal implications.
Next week we're gonna trash talk David Leyonhjelm and talk about Hillary Clinton's emails.
But
so anyway, that was done and dusted. So James Comey said there's no charges. We're moving on. Then this Anthony Weiner thing, the Daily Mail in the UK published a report how he's texting some 15-year-old girl, sexting some 15-year-old girl. So they investigated, reopened the investigation. Now, what's interesting in this regard is
No. So when they did the investigation, they happened to find those emails that were deleted. Yeah.
So there was
that's what prompted the reopening. Yeah.
So what's interesting in that case is that, now that we've spent 5 minutes talking about it, is that the left, all your lefties are like, when James Comey said there's going to be no charges, they're like, hey, look, there's nothing to see here. And then when he reopened the investigation, they're like, oh my gosh, James Comey's trying to tip the election in Trump's favor, or, something like he's trying to get a spot in the Senate or something like that.
They're questioning the timing, and I'm sitting there going like, no, hang on. He got this information 2 weeks ago. Like, I'm saying, like, if he got it back then, he probably would have reopened he would have kept going with the investigation then.
Yeah.
The timing is only suspicious if you think Anthony Weiner is on Trump's side, right?
Or James Comey's on Trump's side. I think that's actually what, or at least that he's a Republican or something. Like he wants to make sure the Senate stays in the hands of the Republicans. That's what they're saying.
Okay, so I'm going to apply Hanlon's razor here and go like I would rather attribute incompetence,
yes,
right, as opposed to malice.
Sure.
And I think it is far more plausible that he was being incompetent prior.
Yeah.
Right, and giving so much advance notice to Hillary Clinton by allowing her to delete all those emails and everything, as opposed to now where he's being opportunistic.
Yeah.
Right. I think that is much more believable than he's on the Republican side. Because there's just, like, I'm sorry, it just makes way more sense, right? Like it just looks like that's what happened.
Sure. Yeah.
Now, I'm not saying that it couldn't be a massive conspiracy. I'm just saying this is the simpler explanation, and it looks like it's probably what happened.
Sure. And, I mean, I think conspiratorial thinking, if I can say it right, conspiratorial thinking about the bureaucracy in government is always kind of stupid, because it doesn't. First, I mean, for a start, most bureaucrats. I mean, I'm sure there are like genuinely selfish, venal people who are in the government, just like they're everywhere. But
there are, and the more selfish and venal they are, the more likely they are not to be very helpful to a conspiracy.
Yeah, exactly. And also, there's not that many of them. Most people just are doing their job, and they're in a system that have bad incentives, so you get bad outcomes because there's just no incentive to get it right. So, like when you hear people talking about, the government's conspiring to do this. Well, no, not really. Like, I'm sure conspiracies actually happen, but they're usually uncovered over time. Most of the time, the government's just incompetent. They're just bad at doing their job because there's no reason to get it right.
And usually when people are claiming government conspiracy, it's just they've got so many freaking actors that are involved and allegedly keeping things a secret. And I'm sitting there going like,
No.
Just one person in that chain
exactly.
would have just exposed the entire thing. And why wouldn't they? I mean, eventually someone's going to douche someone.
Yep. No, that's. I mean, that's why the whole 9/11 thing is so laughable. It's like, if there was actually evidence of this thing, one person could expose the whole thing, and surely, killing a bunch of American citizens would count, or blowing up buildings in the US would count as a reason to uncover that sort of stuff. So,
yeah.
So anyway, we started off talking about Justin Gleason, and so
I mean, but the way these two sort of combine is that there are people, particularly the Washington Post, who've published articles saying that he should follow the actual tradition of how executive power works with the basically anyone who happens to come from a Westminster tradition has this thing where executive members sort of give way to the elected representatives, right? And the idea is if there's any contention between an elected representative and a bureaucrat, the bureaucrat is expected to resign because they were not elected by the people to be there.
See, I'm actually okay with that, even though obviously it's a guaranteed way of getting executive overreach and all sorts of terrible outcomes.
Yeah.
I prefer tyranny in the elected officials who you can theoretically get rid of at some point than sort of a hotbed of tyranny within the bureaucracy that just lasts forever.
Yeah.
You think about like J. Edgar Hoover, who was the head of the FBI for like 50 years or something crazy, and was just like a lunatic who went and tried to get Martin Luther King to kill himself, by threatening to expose adultery, and and did all these witch hunts into the peace movement and all sorts of stuff. You just think you don't like that is worse than ministers in governments being like tin pot dictators. Yeah. So I'm inclined to think that's better.
Yeah, and it's a tradition that the Washington Post article I read, actually, was it Washington Post? Might have been New York Times. But the article I read said, like, when did this tradition die? It used to be a thing. And I kind of agree with that sentiment, just like for the same reasons you said. Even though it kind of looks like you're giving executive overreach, theoretically you can get rid of the executive.
But it's just, it's better. It's just it's not better. It's less worse than the alternative.
Yeah, because, I mean, the only way you can theoretically get rid of a bureaucratic position is to actually, dissolve it. Yeah, abolish the department and then rebuild it, which is a very expensive process, and therefore very few parliaments or congresses are actually willing to go and do that. But,
So here's the question. So this is what I think about sometimes, like, if I was a minister in a government, which I never will be, because I do this show and many other things. But say I was, and I went and started basically telling all the bureaucrats under me, you will do what I tell you, or I'm going to fire you, or push you out of the public service. Is that the libertarian thing to do? Running your government department as a dictatorship, is that a libertarian thing to do?
Well, if you come from the Hans Herpy
that was not intentionally an insult, but I'm okay with it anyway.
But if you come from the HHH school, yes, because governments are like private property. You could physically remove them, so to speak, vis-a-vis.
Yep.
But I would say, from an actual libertarian perspective, no. But mostly for pragmatic reasons.
Okay.
I'd say because you can't necessarily get the best advice out of the public service with that kind of attitude. And also because I think that you'd actually find running things as a dictatorship, that's the best way to say this, ignores the rights of others.
Okay. All right. See, I don't know. Like, I guess the contrarian, burn it to the ground type feelings I have towards government is, yeah, I mean, like, if your goal is to, because the issue with the bureaucracy is they are going to resist any attempt to get rid of them. So if you made me the minister for sports, my goal as a libertarian is to get rid of the department. Now, how easy is it going to be for me to get the department to give me the advice to abolish itself? I'd say it's very difficult.
Yeah, but that's why the executive doesn't have to seek bureaucratic advice. They can actually just abolish departments whole grain.
Sure,
and a good example of that is in 2013 when they got rid of the climate commission.
Sure.
Right? They just went out there and said, "Nope, we're not going to have it anymore."
But the thing is, like, it's actually just So say, you or I become the minister, and we the next day we go to sign the bit of paper to abolish the department. The reality is the departments are involved in a lot of things, and good politics says you need to understand what you're getting rid of before you do it. You essentially want to make sure that any bad PR is dealt with before you then get rid of the department. So say you've got the Department for Sport has got some big contractor with disabled children, and it's going to be a massive PR thing. You need to make sure that's dealt with before you then get rid of the department, because you don't want to. You essentially want to make the abolishing of the department seem
as
good.
Smooth as possible.
Exactly. Yeah. So you kind of actually do need to make sure you understand what your department's doing before you get rid of it. Especially when you start talking about stuff like the Department of Education. It's one thing to say, let's get rid of the Climate Change Authority. That's easy because it was a political thing to begin with, and it's a political thing to get rid of. But if you say, well, we're going to reform the Federal Department of Education by abolishing it, you can't walk in on day one and sign with the bit of paper to get rid of the department. There's a lot of stuff that department does that you just can't get rid of overnight. And so you need your department on board to handle that stuff before you can get rid of them.
So just do what Labor does to try and grow departments, and that is first hit with a Royal Commission to expose a whole bunch of things, and then act on the Commission's recommendations. Now, the trick to that is that
still requires months of help from your department.
And it requires months of testimony, but it all comes down to how you set your terms of reference. So, take the Banking Royal Commission, which we're going through right now.
Sure.
If I were in charge, and if there are any people inside the National Party who are paying attention to the show, please take note. I would set the terms of reference to particularly look at the rate of how many public servants who are being hired in ASIC, for example, are former banking people. Right? How many of them are being contracted? What is the revolving door look like, per se?
Sure. That's helpful in terms of...
Yeah. So I would be setting terms to look at regulatory capture. I would be looking at basic explanations as to why we have so little competition in banking. Just things that restrict loan capacity, right? The hidden costs, where are they coming from? Which piece of regulation is costing them? Right? There are loads of things. You can load up the terms of reference for a Royal Commission to basically come out and give you the this department.
And that's the great line. I think I can't remember who said it, but never said I think it might have been Whitlam. Never start an inquiry that you don't know the result of, or something to that effect.
Yeah, it was. You don't start a Royal Commission until you know the answer. For an answer you don't already have.
Yeah, exactly. So and that's fine, and that's great. 18 months down the track when you're actually getting ready to get rid of the department, but in that 18 months you still have to work with these people. And
sure.
So there's a question of what's the right strategy for libertarians. Do you just say you're going to do what I tell you, or I'm going to fire you, and try to get them to
I'd keep
their own necks under duress?
I would literally avoid rocking the boat and just the thing is, these government departments, if you're trying to get rid of them, you'll find. Just give them enough rope and they'll hang themselves.
Okay, fair enough.
And that's just been the way it's always been. Government departments, if they don't grow, they tend to fail quite easily, and a large part of that reasoning is because their budgets are so tied to labour, the cost of labour.
Yeah. And
unions just... there's no other way to say this, but unions basically hack that budget like crazy.
Yeah.
And the only... And I keep telling people who are pro-union, the unions are actually against the actual service provision. They're two dichotomous positions. If you're pro-union, you're basically saying, I want less government services.
Yep.
So because it's out of the same pie.
Yep.
So as the public service costs increase, the amount that's spent on services goes down. And to everyone, and they go there are some people that go oh, no, we can just put them in two different buckets. It's well, the amount of tax revenue is still the same.
Yeah.
Right? The tax revenue doesn't change. The government isn't able to, create productive growth.
Yep.
Right? Everything the government grows comes from someone else. So they're always dealing with a fixed pie. And the more public service unions take for their workers, and don't get me wrong, I don't mind people being properly remunerated, that's less public services for everyone else. And that's something that needs to be understood.
Okay. Well, I think that probably leaves us in a good point to end the show. Thanks everybody for joining us this week. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. You can like us on Facebook and check us out. So Taking Liberties Radio is our Facebook page. And we'll be back again next week. Oh, subscribe to us on iTunes. That's the other thing. That's what I meant to say.
Oh, you've got iTunes, yeah.
iTunes. So,
all right.
thank you very much, Vikas, and we'll be back again next week.
See ya.